Marlo, welcome. So good to see you.
Hey, Court. Yeah, so good to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining. So I'm just going to launch into it. Marlo, you are, of course, a polar guide extraordinaire, photographer, of course, but also a multimedia artist. And specifically, I recall looking at images and posts and some stories from one of your recent art shows, and you have a number of paintings in there. So while I definitely want to do a deep dive into polar photography, I want to start off by talking about and hearing your thoughts on this intersection of photography and other art forms. I guess specifically your painting. Do you view the two as complementary? And is there anything you've learned about the painting world that perhaps helps with your photography and maybe even vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that photography is art, isn't it? Photography is visual art. So I believe really strongly in that. And I think a lot of the principles are very similar. And I put my foot into the visual art and painting world, a few different medias, but mostly in oil paints when I was really young. And so, even when I was in just like grade school age, my parents, they sent me to it's like a garage and there was a bunch of retired ladies there. And there was one woman who would supply all the paints and you could kind of just come and paint whatever you wanted, but there would be art critique throughout. So all of the people would kind of come and comment on each other's paintings, but also there would be, periodic lessons about composition and color theory and value and all of these things. That start for me is like kind of my base for all of my visual art, not just painting, but photography as well. And so I'm thinking about those things too when I'm taking pictures. But I lecture on it a little bit during my photography trips that I run. So as like a photo expedition leader, I do draw that parallel all the time. I can get into specifics if you want, but yeah, they're totally interlinked. It's all the same.
Well, yeah, I often think about that, with painting. I mean, you get to choose the perfect composition and you get to choose the exact colors each and every time.
Mhm.
So maybe could you speak a little bit specifically about those couple of things? You mentioned color theory, which is actually something I myself am really getting into. I'll be honest, like other than what I just think is my intuitive ability to like colors and to capture colors and to edit for colors, it's something that I feel relatively nascent and early on with. I actually just got a great book by Michael Freeman, who does some amazing photo books. I'd say if there's one author for anyone to check out in the audience, Michael Freeman has some extraordinary photo books. And actually, his book on composition, talking about the other facet I just mentioned, is one of the things that probably propelled me in my photography more than any other resource. So, quick little shout out to Michael Freeman and that book and his color theory. Got to say, I am very overwhelmed by color theory, and we could probably do an entire episode on that. But maybe is there anything specific or particularly helpful when it comes to photography that you could talk about with color theory as you've gleaned from your painting work?
Yeah, well, first I want to come back to one of the things that you said, which was when you're painting, you can choose everything. And when you're taking a photo, you can't always choose everything. Although things are becoming a lot more flexible with editing these
Right.
days. But when I had an aha moment about that, that was when I learned about Robert Bateman. You know Robert Bateman, the
No.
painter? Okay, so you got to look him up.
Okay.
He's really, really well known in Canada. But he's a painter who does a lot of wildlife paintings, and I learned about how he would set up a composition for one of his paintings. And so that's also when I learned principles of leading lines and different components of your picture and how to draw a viewer in for painting. But one of the ways that he would do this would be to have reference photos. You're starting to paint something, you're like, how, especially early on, but truly for a lot of artists all through their career, you're going to be using references to be able to make sure that you're gathering the true gist of the subject that you're trying to portray, right? And so I remember seeing um, like chopped up components of a picture of a snow leopard. That's one of his really famous paintings. And how each of the rocks and the cracks in the rocks were specifically placed to point into the snow leopard that you might not even really fully see when you're first looking at the painting. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's just that big intersection, that mix of, you can have a reference photo, but you can chop that up and then make it into your painting. And yeah, Robert Bateman, someone who I can really thank for that. Really inspirational guy. Color theory, I think I had a big moment too in my recent very first trip to Utah. An example of, you know, one of the principles of color theory is, this idea of complementary colors and colors that we do like to see together. And very trendy these days in people's homes. You see a lot of like warm tones along with teal. I've got a lot of it going on in my house, like this teal color
Hmm.
with a terracotta pot. I have one right over there.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That color balance or that the complementary, those two specifically, very
Yep.
hot right now. Now I love them too.
Orange and teal. And there's a reason why
Hmm.
we like it is that it's biological, right? So if you look at a color wheel, then they're on the opposite sides of that color wheel. And we love that. So there's a lot of people who are editing their photos or making presets right now to really pull out those two colors or even just create them in the image so that it feels like an aesthetic that we like. And I was just blown away by driving through Utah and I was like, oh my gosh, it's true. Like this landscape really does look like that because of, all the red rock, but the sage and the way that the light hits the sage on the side of the road, even, I was just like blown away. No wonder why it's been so inspirational by artists and photographers all over the world. It's not just like what you're seeing it, but how you're seeing it. So that's one thing about color theory that I can add without going off the rails.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm glad you mentioned that specific color combination because anybody listening, if you've looked at any photos from, popular kind of hot or trendy photographers or photographs specifically these days, you're going to see that color. I'm actually editing photos from a recent trip to Nepal and I stumbled upon a preset just like that. And it kind of changes the hue of the blues from more of a purple to more of like a lighter, maybe like a teal blue, and it's extraordinary. It gives this kind of interesting vibe where you're not just warming the whole photo with a warm white balance or cooling the whole thing off. You're actually creating this maybe tension is the right word where you're splitting it and you're actually adding both the warm and the cool. So you're creating this tension that's also resolved by the color theory you're talking about. So I think that's brilliant. Just a curiosity of mine, since I think you probably know more about color theory than I do, are there any other complementary colors that come to mind that it's almost as if we could predict where new trends might go if we're just looking at that wheel and kind of thinking of it from a scientific mathematic point of view. And no worries if you don't have them off the top of your head, but I'm just curious, are there any others like that I don't know of any, to be honest, like purple and yellow or something like that. I don't know. Anything come to mind?
I mean, red and green have been together for a very long time. You guys
True.
know Christmas, right? That's like a lifelong trend. These are trends that have been around forever because it's just has to do with our own biology and the way that we see wavelengths of light. So I do think that people have kind of really grasped onto this specific thing right now, but I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't think I can tell the future, but I do think it is worth anyone who's creating visual art to take a moment and think, why do I like this thing? Why am I spending extra time with this thing? This thing meaning a piece of work, whether it be a painting or a drawing or a photograph. And it's not just composition, it's color too.
Totally. And then that hits on a point that I've been teaching and talking about a lot lately, which is the intentionality behind photography. If you're not being intentional about a lot of facets of your photo, if not most or all, you're really missing out. And the more intentional, the more deliberate, really the more artsy you become and exude in your photographs. So I love that. I love that. So I want to go back to composition again, just kind of a personal curiosity thing with painting. So in photography, when I'm teaching about composition, I'm talking about ye old rule of thirds. I'm talking about leading lines. I'm talking about layering and framing with painting and maybe with your photography too, do you try to incorporate as many of those as possible? I often find that my favorite photos have more than one compositional trick or one compositional element. You know, it's the rule of thirds or something like it, plus its leading lines or plus its framing or layering or anything like that. The reason I'm asking is with painting, again, you get to choose all that. So while in nature we may not see a mountain scene with the perfect river in the bottom third and the sky in the upper third with all the elements we want, in painting, you know, you can find that, you can paint it, you can create it, but you can also put in a leading line. You can also put in some framing. Do you think more is better, or is it like your natural innate judgment, or do you look at those things like I do and that the more the merrier, especially with painting and maybe as an aside with photography too?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think that okay, this is how I really feel about this. Is that there,
That's what we
yeah.
want. It's what the people want.
There's a lot of
Marlo unplugged.
exactly. There's a lot of rules in painting, rules in photography, and I truly believe that most of those rules are also just really meant to be broken. And I think that the consistency with those rules, you know, rule of thirds and leading lines and layering and framing and all this stuff is really neat. And there's a lot of pictures where I'm like, oh, I see what they did there. And um, I agree with some of the choices that were made. But there are other pictures and paintings where there's none of that at all. And I also really love them because they're very different. And so I wouldn't say that I'm super consistent on saying, every picture needs to have, the proper leading line. Now, it is nice to be able to, change a shadow a little bit, if you're trying to direct attention in a particular way. And then you have that like high point of contrast where you want it to be, which might not be in whatever you're using for reference. And that's for, if you're trying to do a realist type painting, but truly, that's not what all paintings are. Obviously, we all know that they're not all, here's a landscape of mountains and rivers and all that, but all of these principles you are also using in something, as different as abstract art, and even more so, probably. If I'm making an abstract piece, and I did have a few of them in my show as well, I'm really, really thinking about that because those are like the super basic things that are going to hold people in with my painting is where is the weight in the painting, and where does the kind of flow of the eye go, and how interesting and intricate are particular parts of that painting. And I'm thinking about all of those things, especially in an abstract piece. I would say above all, though, for me personally, and this probably does come from my like, painting and visual arts before, learning more about photography. I think about value a lot, value and weight in a picture and in a painting, and some of that might come from the fact that if you're doing an oil painting, maybe not everyone would know this, but a lot of like traditional painting, oil painting would have many layers. And so, you're priming your canvas, and then you have, maybe a reference image. Let's say you're trying to paint a realist image of something, a landscape, and your first layer would be only value. So, some people would use black and white, but more typically you would have like a sienna version of your painting that you would do completely just, lights and darks, block out where you want what. And sometimes people do it very tight. So all the details are very specific in that underpainting. And sometimes people do it very, very loose. And if you kind of stand back or squint your eyes, it's all, you have to kind of be the artist to fully discern, what's going to be where. And those are really big lessons for me because, as a painter, your following layers are really being built on that, and it's going to create a lot more depth in your image. Um, but also, it's like the very starting point of the composition of your picture, and it becomes very clear where your eye is drawn, right? So the point of highest contrast, where does that exist, and where are my darkest darks, and are my darkest darks balanced throughout that painting? And I think about that a lot in my photography as well. Are my darkest darks balanced throughout that picture? And have I thought about that? And can I add something or take something away in post to make it feel like it has more balance? Um, those are the things I think about.
And getting back to that intentionality, I mean, it's very intentional. I don't want to say calculated because that sounds like not art, but like the intentionality is so key. If there's any takeaway from this podcast or this little lesson here, yeah, the intentionality is everything. And even what you said about rules are meant to be broken, 110%, right?
Mhm.
I think it's key that people know the rules and maybe even start with the rules, but think about how to break them. How do you go against them with intention, of course, right? So you've brought up a topic that kind of parlays perfectly into my next question, which is about your art show and art shows. What were those like? And can you talk to me about the experience, some of the benefits you saw, and maybe a little bit about, what can you teach others about why and perhaps how to do art shows, to get into art shows and design them and, broker them, so to speak. I think it's a really interesting thing you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak a lot to that. It's a big process and they're big projects. There's some situational kind of almost luckiness, I suppose, because I live in a small town in northern British Columbia, and we have a small but really vibrant art gallery. And I've been building a relationship with them for years now, and there's somebody who like myself, even 5 years ago, kind of as an emerging photographer in the area, I was able to just, submit an application as they were looking for their annual list of people who would do shows. And you can apply with a portion of your portfolio for this particular art gallery. You can apply with your portfolio and artist statement and an idea of what your show would be in about a year and a half in advance, and apply for a certain surface area of the gallery as well. And it would be a month-long show, and they do month-long rotations. There's other ways that you can do it too, though. Like a lot of photographers have their pictures up at coffee shops and things like that. And sometimes it's just kind of, getting to know the people who are running the place and
Hmm.
seeing if you can kind of make a deal to get your artwork up in front of people. I would say doing this the way that I was able to, and I had a show in 2020, 2021, somewhere in that kind of in that winter, and then this previous November, both at the same art gallery. And I would say one of the big benefits with that kind of type of agreement of it, or the artwork only being up and available for that month-long period, is that people who are coming to see it and who are considering purchasing a piece, there is that kind of timeline. And I do see a lot of people who are putting photos up in cafes and they might be up there for a year. Um,
Hmm.
and people kind of feel like that opportunity is kind of always there. And for myself, this is really the only time that I'm really putting my work out there for people to purchase. And so it made for a couple of really successful shows, in part because of that maybe, but also because I had a large um, digital component to the shows as well, and I was really mindful to make sure that everything was put up online so that people who are not able to come were able to see that. And the first show that I did during COVID was that was especially important because we couldn't have, an opening night, and we couldn't, the gallery wasn't allowed to have over a certain number of people that were coming in. But, I was able to be there and present in the gallery quite often, which is really nice to be able to kind of share the story of your pieces. And I would say, as a photographer and a painter and just a creative person in general, it has been the single best investment that I've really made in helping create more professional work and understanding how to, you know, share my work with other people. And so it's not just for me then, it's for other people, and how to curate. Curating, oh my gosh, it's like the biggest thing. It's
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well, I definitely have some follow-up questions. The
yeah.
the first I'm wondering is, have you noticed any, I guess I would say, uptick in ancillary things like, people reaching out to you for different photographs or, other jobs or bespoke photographs or anything beyond just the kind of in the moment, in the show transaction?
Yeah, yep, there was people who wanted, different different sizes of particular pieces sometimes if they were photos. So my last show that I had about 70 pieces, and I would say it was probably like half paintings, half photos. And uh, yeah, I have gotten painting commissions from these shows and some additional requests, but also just the broader like knowledge and awareness in the community that I'm doing this. I would say that that's where a lot of the value is, and you can kind of choose what you'd like to do because I don't have, a print shop that I have running all the time on a website or something like that. Like you've really got to kind of contact me directly to do it that way. And I don't know if that's necessarily advisable, but that's just the way that I do it. And some of it is out of necessity because I I'm working away so much. I really am. I'm just guiding all the time.
Hmm.
And so it makes it really hard to follow up on small projects like that. I'd much rather do one big project where I can think about my work that I have that's new as a whole and what is the best that I can show everybody and how can I really share a story with a series instead of, have a singular like transaction or connection with somebody. But it's all just building, I really thought after my first show, it was really, really hard. And I just like the curating process and purchasing your prints beforehand and but also the hanging took a very long time. A lot of galleries will do it all themselves. Some other galleries will allow you to have a lot of creative process. Um, and this particular gallery is a nonprofit, so it's a lot is put onto the artist, and that's okay. I learned a lot in that, and it was a big investment in a lot of ways. And I think after both shows, while I was hanging, I was like, I'm never doing this again. This is so hard. And it's like before anybody else sees the work, all artists, we second guess a lot of things, right? But also in both shows, the week after the opening, it was like, oh, I can't wait to do this again. Like, I'm definitely going to do this again.
Yeah. Do you have another one lined up or at least in your mind?
No, I have to accumulate some new work. And so I'm in the process of thinking about what that's going to look like. And it'll probably be a number of years from now before I have a big show like that again. I would consider doing like one half the size maybe. Um, yeah, and or maybe trying to get something in a different place, like maybe one of the neighboring communities or even something down in the lower mainland.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, last question about the show, and then I want to do our deep dive into Arctic photography with your tips and tricks and advice and vision. But who do you use, and maybe more importantly, who do you trust to print your photos?
Yeah, there's a Canadian printer called Poster Jack, and I'm happy to share. Like, I really think that the economics of doing all of this is really important to share tips and tricks with people. So I have
Hmm.
no problem with that. They're they are reasonably priced, but they have a variety of products. They're not all the same quality, I would say. So definitely, if you're doing a big print with them, test before you receive your print. And I have had print mistakes by them as well. And so like quality checks is really, really important. But for me, the a lot of the value comes in one, they're Canadian and I'm Canadian, so that really helps.
Hmm.
Um, Two, they have very specific, very finished gallery ready product that I love for photography, which is their gallery boxes. So you have like a
Mm.
board that's almost kind of a mat that has a black frame around it, and it also has a wired hanging apparatus on the back, which is like absolutely pivotal for hanging something in these particular galleries. You've got to figure out your hanging system, which you probably never cared about before you had to do. And
The things you learn.
yeah, but their customer service is really good. So in times where I've had reprints from them, and I've printed a lot with them, uh, they've been pretty no questions asked. I'll send you a reprint right away, and obviously free of charge. And that's been really really good. They also will hold on to files for a short period of time. I had a hard drive issue, and I had a picture that a client wanted to come back and get another print of, and I was like, I don't have that picture anymore.
Oh no. Oh,
And
the nightmare
I
of all
know.
we photographers.
I know. And I was like, hey, do you have that TIFF file from this? Da, da, da. And they're like, let us do some digging. And they found it, and I was able to get the print and also the TIFF file back.
Hmm.
So that was
And
great.
you print in TIFF.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I got to be honest. Like I'm not the most techie person, but I was told once to print in the biggest TIFF that you have. So that's what I
Hmm.
did.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
cool. Well, I'll put so that's poster jack. I'll put that in the show notes for
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, great advice. Very interesting. I'll be honest, I have not physically myself printed a lot of photos over the years. I tend to hand them in to graphic designers or magazines or whatever they might be. So I don't know the magic behind the scenes. I don't know if they're converting them to TIFF. Probably not for smaller print pieces, but it's really good to know in terms of larger things. Absolutely. Okay, so I'd like to switch gears here and get into some of the technique and maybe mindset of your polar photography. I know there are a lot of things that you're into, but that's one that really jumps out to me, especially when I see your website and, of course, see images from your show. So you do guide a lot in polar regions, namely Greenland, the Canadian Arctic, and Antarctica. If there's anything I'm missing, feel free to let me know. But what are some lessons you could impart to others about photographing in these areas? Perhaps it has to do with the mindset going into the trip or going into the specific scene. Maybe it's technique and, fun apertures and f-stops, or maybe something else.
Yeah. When I think of working and photographing in the Arctic, I just think about how rugged and extreme that environment is and how unforgiving it is. It's unforgiving to you and it's unforgiving to your gear. So, uh, participant beware, I suppose. And for me, the most important thing, especially because I'm guiding while I'm out there, is to have a photography system that is really, I would just call it quick and dirty, especially if I'm not doing a photography trip per se. I'm doing, a regular expedition, but I want to, obviously, the great light doesn't always wait for the photography trip. You kind of hope that it does, but you're going to have amazing moments out there that you'll want to document. And so for me, having my kit in something that's really durable, like while I'm packing from like example in Greenland from base camp to Zodiac, from Zodiac to hiking, from hiking back to Zodiac. And, it could be a beautiful day, it could be raining, there could be salt spray from, being in the Zodiac and there's splash coming into the boat. And I find that protecting my gear from all of those movements, one, and two, the salt water and the elements is a big consideration of mine. And when I'm doing trips in Antarctica, I'm also working on a sailboat, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So I have a like uber waterproof backpack and kind of a padded system that I use to be able to put
Hmm.
my lens in there really quickly and be able to pull it out super quickly. And when I'm not doing a photography trip, I do have my camera sitting in aperture priority often so that I can really quickly create a scene and snap a picture, especially if, wildlife doesn't wait around for you to get everything swapped out. And I usually have my long lens sitting on my camera. And, it's obviously a benefit if you have wildlife coming around, but it's also kind of my favorite way to shoot landscape shots in polar environments because I really like the compression of,
Using a wildlife lens, like a zoom telephoto. Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I really do. And I think it's probably 30% convenience because the lens is already on my camera and I can just really quickly do that. But it's 70% I just really like those images because you can get a really great compression of those mountains that are in the back, having them behind whatever your subject is. In like a basic, polar photo, you got iceberg, right? You've got, you know, beautiful, beautiful water, iceberg sitting with mountains behind, let's say, right? And having all those layers kind of squish up a little bit, it, to me, I feel like it does more justice to kind of the grandeur of the landscape. Not everybody makes
Hmm.
that choice, but I do. So yeah, for me, it's those two things.
Yeah, fully agree, and that's something I actually teach quite often is that the bigger the landscape, almost the less I'm reliant on a wide angle or especially a ultra wide. A lot of times people go to these big areas, the Arctic, Antarctica, the rugged terrain of Greenland, and they think, well, it's a big area, so I should bring my ultra wide, my 16 to 35 or 10 to 22. And yeah, I kind of think it's almost the exact opposite. Like I want to it's easy to get sucked into trying to capture the whole scene, right? Amazing mountains and icebergs and gravel beaches and all this. But the reality is, in one photo, unless you're going to blow that up to like a 4 foot by 6 foot, you're going to lose the detail in some of those things. And having a 70 to 200 or 100 to 400, yeah, is my best friend because I can not only just compress the landscape and get those layers, but it also gets the viewer to hone in on specific elements. And we're now in a world where usually when we're showing photos, this is outside of art shows, usually we are showing a series. It's a post with the ability to put 10 photos, or it's a website where you're automatically making a collage. And so breaking it into little pieces and parts, I think, is hugely helpful advice. And I agree. Not only do I also agree that your photos are beautiful in that way, but it's one of my personal preferences too. So that was what I was going to ask next, actually, is about the gear. Is there any photo gear that you think is particularly helpful when photographing in these areas? But I think I just got it. It sounds like, the waterproof bag for peace of mind, as well as just general safety and security. I'm guessing, is that the Ortlieb bag, or is it something else?
It's not, it would be great if it was. I honestly can't even remember the brand of it, but it's just one of those like mega dry bags that you roll down and close.
Sure, but it's
And you
truly watertight. Like it
put
could
water,
fall off the side of a boat and it would still be dry.
you
Yeah.
could throw it in. Because I
Yeah,
think,
anything could happen when you're in and out of zodiacs. You're grabbing hands. You have to jump in the water to go grab a line as a guide. Yeah, totally agree. So yeah, talk to me a little bit more about the specifics of your camera gear. What are you shooting on in general? But obviously, I'd love to hear more about polar regions. Camera body. What is that choice lens that you have that's on your camera most of the time?
yeah. Well, I'm in an awkward stage as a photographer right now because I'm transitioning brands and kits. So it is an interesting time to be me doing this because I don't have like my kit isn't 100% on either side of the brands that I'm using. But
Hmm.
over the last number of years, I've used my Canon 5D4. So I have been a late converter to mirrorless photos and have just been super religious about having my 1 to 400 L series 2 lens
Hmm.
just attached to that camera. And it's done so well for me. It's such a rugged kit. And it still produces really beautiful photos, even though it doesn't have a lot of the bells and whistles of the newer cameras.
Hmm.
And so that's been my kit for a really long time. And I'm currently transitioning my kit to Sony.
Hmm.
So if anybody if anybody is old enough to know or to see this camera, it's like a more than a 10-pound kit.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The
It's
5D4.
even 5D4 with that 1 to 4 lens is
Hmm.
is huge, and it's quite cumbersome to travel the world with this kit. And so I kind of made a promise to myself that my next kit was going to be a lot like still very powerful, but a lot smaller. And I've just been looking for years really to figure out what that was going to be. And for now, I have a Sony Alpha 7C2, and it's one
Hmm.
of the most compact full frame cameras that's on the
Hmm.
market right now. And it's a really good kind of hybrid camera for both photography and videography. And I have a long lens on that camera or a short lens on that camera right now because I was using it for Northern Lights season, and I'm
Hmm.
picking up the 1 to 400 lens that Sony has now for my Greenland season as well. But it performs pretty well, but it's the one thing about that darn camera is that the display it is not the highest quality, and
Hmm.
that's one thing that if I ever would do it again, I would look at that and consider something that maybe has a higher resolution on that display camera because it's just so important to see how your image quality is while you're out in the field. And so far as a night photography camera, it's performed quite well. But it's yeah. it has, like any camera, right? It has limitations. And I would say like I'm not a mega gearhead when it comes to this kind of stuff. Like I said, my photography style is pretty quick and dirty, and what's really important to me is to be able to like get the shot in the moment and have my kit ready, but also to be really dialed in, like knowing what my kit is capable of, and um not having to do these crazy lens switches all the time. I used to go into the field with like multiple bodies. And these days I'm just going in with one body and a couple lenses, maybe three, but usually just a couple. And I just say like, this is my limitation. I have to work within these bounds. And I find that that helps you be more creative in your thinking to
What's
not.
your Northern Light lens?
So it's a 10 to 18. So it's not like the widest of the wide, but it did pretty well this season, and it's a 2.8.
Yeah,
How
excellent.
small is this?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good lens. Yeah, the Canon mirrorless version of that is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's the 15 to 35, beautiful lens, but oh my gosh, it's like bigger than the 24 to 72.8. Like it's kind of a beast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge thing. Going ultralight, small, compact when traveling, especially when toting all the guide gear. So 100% understand the switch and the direction. Let's talk about photographing polar bears, another one of the Arctic wonders and something that I know you do a lot of. When you are photographing polar bears, what are you looking for? What are you waiting for? What according to Marlo would get you the next level photo? Because I can tell from your photo style, you are indeed intentional. You are patient. You're looking for something maybe different, or at least showing it in a different way, a different light. I guess metaphorically and literally in some cases. And you've seen a lot of these things, right? You've seen a lot of polar bears. So what is it that you're looking for, or what do you try to capture to get your choice photos? Dare I say, the next level of photo of something you've seen many times before, like a polar bear.
Yeah, well, the polar bear photos that I've taken have all been in Churchill, Manitoba. And for anybody who's ever done any wildlife photography out there, you know that composition is a really big challenge when you're in Churchill. And for me, a lot of that has to do with just the different values in the landscape, just going back to the beginning of our conversation. So there you have these really dark willow bushes that are, and the bears are largely, not always, but often on land. And these willow bushes up against that white snow is one, creating a high point of contrast that's really distracting to the eye, but two, they create these kind of crazy jagged, like not straight lines. And if you have a cloudy day, which often it's cloudy during the time of year where the polar bears are out there, then it's difficult to actually make your horizon line look good, because in the distance
Mm,
you have these like rows of willows. And so that's one thing I'm thinking about often, is if I'm watching a polar bear walk through the landscape, is where are the willows in that picture? And how is the bear being framed by the landscape? Because I think that's probably the one of the first things that makes or breaks a really great photo in Churchill for me. I really notice it. And for people who um, have seen photos of polar bears before, but you haven't photographed them, most of the polar bear photos that you've seen, if they have these dark willows around them, are going to be have shot in this particular area. So for me, it's finding the most simple composition with the least distraction. I think for me is the most important, and then obviously having good light,
hmm
just taking advantage of light as it comes, and you can't really control that. But on your day that you're having good light, geez, hopefully you're ready ready for the moment,
hmm
and you're in the right place. Um, yeah, and I would say just from my photos, but also looking at other people's photos in the world of wildlife photography, I am always thinking about what was the perspective or the angle of the viewer on that bear changes the feeling in that picture. That's a really important
hmm
for any wildlife photography, but especially for these polar bear photo trips, you have. you're often shooting from a vehicle, and the vehicles are quite raised because they don't want the polar bears to crawl in. Fair enough. And
Important.
important, exactly. And because of that, you get this kind of viewer down look at the bears. And sometimes that's not a problem, but I do like my pictures that are bears that are slightly farther away. And that plane kind of starts to level out, and it looks like you're almost like eye to eye with that bear. You're on the same level. And I also really do look for the behavior, what I can see through a photo of the behavior of that animal in any wildlife photography, but for polar bears, it's definitely rings true. Do they look afraid? Are they looking directly into the lens? Are they looking in a curious way, or are they looking in a, oh my goodness, you guys just approached so quickly and, right on top of me and I need to get out of here kind of thing. And for people who don't do a lot of wildlife photography, or they're just focused on like photo with the most bear that they possibly can, they can kind of get lost by that. And some of that also has to do with just, making sure that you are traveling in a responsible way with a company that's not going to put an animal in that situation. And so I feel really fortunate to be a part of a company that is like at the core of our value system, is like doing everything in the best interest of the critters. And, the photo definitely comes second. And I think that that's something that we all need to remember.
Well
Yeah.
said. Well said. Yeah, just to echo your thought and your interests in terms of photographic opportunities, I'm the same way. I would prefer a polar bear, 50 yards, 100 yards away versus one that's right underneath me because of that angle, frankly. It's extraordinary when you can get a bear that's up on a little bit of a berm in the willows. So you are really shooting quite plain with that animal. So yeah, it's all the more reason to bring that beefy telephoto with you on those trips, because that's the best way to do it in my opinion. But that leads me to another question, which is, do you tend to have a certain style of polar bear photo in the sense, like I personally view wildlife photography kind of in two camps. You can have wildlife portraiture where you're really showcasing maybe the expression of the animal, or really just the detail, like zooming in. This is of course where close bears are, they're fantastic. Or are you looking more for the wildlife in landscape shot, or are you trying to do it all?
I like all things, but I would say, the limitation of what you can really do is some of it has to do with light and your camera's capabilities, right? So, again, my kit for a long time has not been, the newest on the market. She can perform really well, but I'm not going to be taking detail shots unless I have a lot of light and the bear is really quite close. And
Mm,
when that opportunity does happen, I will try for that and see what I'm able to come up with. But otherwise, yeah, I'm really thinking about composition and barren landscape. But if the willows aren't right, it can't be that, and I will crop.
mm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So I think one of our superpowers as guides and biologists, but also photographers, is getting this added benefit of being able to analyze behavior to anticipate shots. And you being a bear behavior expert and biologist and someone that's been around bears, all sorts of bears, for quite some time, do you have any tricks or any things you do or keep front of mind when analyzing the behavior of bears? And it could be, of course, any wildlife, to get those great photos in anticipation of something happening. Any strategies you employ?
yeah, I think the most important strategy for any wildlife photographer, again, is just patience and respect for the critter. And I think a lot of the times, most of the times, that really pays off. Because again, if you don't have that, you're gonna push yourself into a situation where you're just seeing behavior that, one, you really don't want to see for the well-being of the critter, but also for your picture. It's just for people who know what they're looking at, they can tell that you've kind of approached too quickly for that critter. And whether bears are they have very expressive
Mhm.
faces, and these forward-facing eyes, and especially grizzly bears, you can really see their eyes. And um, I find that you can often tell. So I would say that the best strategy is um, going into an encounter knowing that you are going to take your time. And for me on photography trips, really communicating that to guests as well that might be newer to photographing large carnivores is, it can take quite the moment to be able to set up a close encounter with this critter. We have to have permissions on both sides. And they are setting the rules in some aspect, right? And with bears, there's lots of cues that you can watch for. Are they smelling the air? Are they yawning? Are they, how are they facing you? Are they facing you straight on? Are they kind of walking in like a angled direction to you, but still checking on you? Are they running away? Are you just looking at their butt? You see all these things. Um, and there's the bear behavior is really, really complex. So we could have a really long conversation about this, but
I'm sure we could.
yeah, trust your guide, and know that these critters are kind of living a world that's very different than ours, and it's a lot more complex in that um, they're not just in a visual landscape, they're in a smell scape, and so we are a part of that as you know photographers that are interacting with these animals. But there can also be a lot of other things at play that we don't see because we can't smell them, and that could be other animals around as well. And so I'm always looking to see if bears are responding to any kind of stimulants like that. Yeah.
hmm
Is
hmm
that right? Right? Stimulus, whatever. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit here, photo processing is becoming such an important part of photography. And when I say processing, it's well beyond the editing or the photoshopping. It's also the selection of images, it's the culling of images. And so, I want to ask you about your approach to processing and editing. But I also want to ask this other question, which could honestly be a totally different answer or topic, but I wanted to pair this with it. So, one, what is your editing and processing style and approach? But then also, what is the Marlo photo style? That's again, I think a lot of that can come out in editing, but certainly a lot comes out with the actual raw capture in camera. What are you looking for? What sort of images do you prefer? And yeah, what is your photo style and how do you approach editing?
Yeah. I've been told before that my photo style is dark and moody. I tend to agree. I do like dark images. I like high contrast images too, not in a way that looks like ultra mega processed, but just in a way that the blacks are truly black, and when it's printed, you get that really kind of beautiful like matte black feeling to your
Going
shot.
back to those values you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, I think about values a lot, and I would say, yeah, just being able to capture any kind of an emotion in an image. I find those are the pictures that I want to spend a lot more time with, and those are the ones that I tend to like and favor more of my own pictures, but of also other people's images. So, yeah, I would say dark and moody is my style if I had to choose it. And my photo processing system. I'm going to start with just a short story, but there's a National Geographic photographer, Daisy. I'm really sorry. I'm going to butcher your last name, but it's Gillardini. And she's quite a well-known bear photographer as well. She had a series of stamps in Canada, actually a bunch of portraits of bears, and they're very beautiful. And we've done some work together on a ship on the British Columbia coast looking for grizzly bears. And I am a person, at any opportunity, I'm going to ask for mentorship and the opportunity to expand my knowledge, especially with this kind of stuff, because it's always changing and everybody has their own system. And so I wonder if she'll ever hear this, but I did cheekily kind of stay up late one night. She was processing her pictures, and I had a lot of thought previous to think, okay, well, if I had a moment with Daisy, what would be the one thing that I would ask her about her photography career? And the thing that I asked was, like, how do you organize your photos? What do you do? Like, what's your first step? And geez, I learned a lot because she came from I think a finance or an accounting background before she got into photography, and she just has this engineer mindset of uber organization. And I mean, to without going into and selling all of her secrets, I would say one thing that I learned and try to practice now is that she formats her cards every day, every night.
Mm.
So she'll, after a day of shooting, upload all the pictures, back up all the pictures, and then next day format card is, completely available. And she takes a lot of images. And so it was a great thing to learn because it is quite opposite to what I do. I have a lot of anxiety about deleting pictures because I was
Same. Oh
just no
yeah.
more backup, right? But she just knows what her system is and knows that it's really safe because she's got, things on the cloud and things on a drive,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
fire safe box, and it's her career full time, right? So it makes sense that she's really, really dialed with her assets really in that way. And then I'm also someone who doesn't take that many pictures. I'm really choosy about when I have my kid out because again, I'm guiding all the time. And also I can kind of see and think about, okay, this is the one. So yeah, really, really talented. I learned that from her, formatting card every day. And she has daily folders and all this. Another photographer, Talon Gillis, is a photographer from Terrace, who's also fairly well known. Terrace is a small town that I'm from. I also brought him to a coffee shop, and that was the thing that I asked him. And that was when I think I still had a Rebel. Like it was one of my very first cameras, and I was just learning nature photography. And I was like, I don't understand Lightroom. This is years and years ago. I don't understand Lightroom. I don't understand post processing. What should I do? And he was like, my number one piece of advice is to learn how to catalog correctly. And so I have to thank him again, for being, a mentor to me. And he showed me, once I have my pictures on my drive and then get them onto Lightroom, he showed me how to flag and rate my pictures, in a really kind of quick way so that I can very quickly consolidate everything that I think is usable and then
Mm.
start my editing process from there. And so I'm sure you have people who are really well versed in Lightroom and maybe some people who are new to it. But if you are just cruising through your catalog of your pictures of, let's say it was just that day of shooting whatever you're shooting, maybe it was a grizzly bear, and you go to the numbers on the top of your keyboard and you just press number 2, then that photo is ranked as 2 stars. And then 10 photos in, you're looking at all of the pictures from one particular moment. You like this one the most, rank it as 4 or something, 4 star. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can go to the bottom and choose sort by rating. And then all of a sudden everything is up there that you want to be actually editing. I do this when I'm on uh, all of my trips, not just photography trips, because I need a really quick turnaround system for getting guests their photos before I go to the next trip, which is the next day. And so on any given trip that's about a week long, I'll probably have 30 to 50 images that I think are, probably valuable to those guests. And of
Mm-hmm.
those, maybe 5 that are I really, really like. And of those, maybe 1 that I'm going to post on social media. And yeah, that's my system for finding what I like and then being able to export those and put them in a separate edits folder for that particular trip. And instead of having things organized day by day, I organize everything trip by trip. So for me, it's like a week at a time. And as a general ethos, without going too into detail, I'm a believer of global edits before local edits. I bring in a lot of shadows in my images. I do a lot of masking. I think that that's a really great tool for wildlife photographers and landscape photographers. I don't do very much layering, and that's just kind of a personal choice. Again, like as quick as I can get a picture to where I like it, I'm going to do that. I am a lot about efficiency because there's a lot of volume, and um, I'm also super liberal with my temperature and my white balance.
Mm. Okay. How so?
I like warm pictures and I
Mm-hmm.
work in cold places, so that doesn't always work. But there are people who are, they find a neutral white balance and that's what it needs to be because that's what it looked like while you were there. And I choose to not abide by that.
Yeah. Well, now, do you have your camera set on like a cloudy white balance or something warm, or is this primarily done in your Photoshop and Lightroom?
Only if I'm doing lights. Northern lights, I am choosy about my white balance just based on like which of my 2 cameras that I'm using to
Mm-hmm.
get the color of northern lights that I want. Because truly, like, what your camera is seeing is different than what your
Right.
eyeball is seeing, so you might as well just keep stretching.
Yeah, yeah. That might be the takeaway, Chloe, but you might as well just keep stretching it. But no,
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, that
Yeah.
is where the art comes into play. Is you have that leeway.
Yeah.
Nobody says you're, writing a guidebook and explaining the exact spectrogram of the oxygen particles from the northern lights. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. We've all seen pictures that are a little bit overdone, but you know what I mean. And I feel, yeah, otherwise I'm auto white balance all the way. I'm,
Okay.
yeah, I am an auto white balance and just deal with it in post.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of my shooting strategy when I'm in the field, and a lot of this I'm thinking like, okay, let's say we're on a Zodiac tour in Antarctica, and there's a lot of things to consider and to be looking at. You have a lot of situational awareness. I'm probably also driving the boat, right? So interpreting the area, making sure people are safe, navigating, and then, oh my gosh, there's a leopard seal. And, and it's hauled up on a iceberg and it's amazing and we need some wildlife shots of this. So I gotta like pull my camera really quickly. I know that it's gonna be in probably an aperture priority. And just knowing that I have aperture priority, auto white balance, ISO like set to auto with a limit. Then I just have a couple of things that I need to make sure that are um, really solid, and I might swap it over into shutter priority if there's a lot of movement or something like that. But then I know that I can get my image if I have like a reliable camera that can produce something really good, and I can
Hmm.
think about composition, and that's usually what I do. Think about composition a lot, and I underexpose a lot. I try to underexpose if I can, so that I don't overblow things, and I can sort out my exposure in post so that it looks
So even
more
even
normal.
in polar areas, you will underexpose.
Um, Not always. Sometimes I will.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So, I mean, it's just kind of like one of the principles of polar photography, and maybe you've talked about this on your podcast before, Court, but you know, on your camera sees a lot of bright white when you're photographing in polar areas, and so if you have auto settings happening on your camera, then it will try to underexpose your image, and your
Hmm.
image will look quite gray and
Hmm.
flat because it's trying to compensate for the fact that it's a very bright area. So, contrary to what a lot of people would think, it's typical to bump up your exposure compensation on your camera, or if you're shooting in manual, making sure that you are taking in a little bit of extra light, keep it bright. Um, and yeah, I do some of that. But if I'm like on the fly between, teaching the guests, keeping them safe, moving the vessel, doing all this stuff, and I'm seeing that my exposure isn't quite right, and I'm having trouble finding it, I will default to underexposing so that I keep all of the values in my picture, and I can change it in post because I mean we all know this, right? As soon as you blow out your image and as soon as you're losing detail, especially in that snow, then you're hooped.
Hmm. Might need to define hooped.
Yeah. I mean, the
No.
technology is getting so much better every minute, right? We can bring things back from some pretty big mistakes out there, but obviously better image quality from the get-go. That's going to help,
Hmm.
especially if you're printing big. But yeah.
Yeah. So a couple important things I want to just kind of reiterate, going way back minutes and minutes. One was that you believe in global edits before local edits, and so that basically means adjusting the entire image for all shadows across edge to edge before you do any sort of brush or masking or anything like that. I think that's a really important, interesting takeaway. I also think it's really helpful to understand kind of the relativity of how many photos you take versus how many you might export as your final processed versus how many you might put in your kind of your best of or portfolio album. And I think it's something that a lot of people, especially those just getting started or even really quite far in but not having been around a lot of pro photographers, is you might take 500, 1,000, 2,000 photos and get 30 to 50 that make the final edit, the final cut. And then truly for a trip, especially if you're traveling as much as you do, but even if you're doing a lot less, you might only need or want to take out one or two of those really tippy top best photos for your be all end all, save forever, access super quickly album. I think it's just important to understand how much folks like you and I will cull down those that we take on the trip to what stage we're sharing and keeping forever. So very interesting there. Okay, I'm going to get into some quicker questions here, but I just have a feeling this is going to yield an interesting response. What is the most uncomfortable you've ever been to get a photograph? And was it worth it?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had to think about this for a little bit. There's a couple of stories. I'm going to choose the most recent one. So, uh, if you remember, it wasn't that long ago that there was a total lunar eclipse, and it was that night where it was, minus 40 degrees with the wind chill, and I had a photography group, and it was their first night of the trip. So for a lot of people, it was their first time taking night photography or night photos, right? And that's a huge day for a lot of people because that is when you learn that you don't know where every button is because you're taking pictures. And that's also where you learn what that night photography is a lot of trial and error. You don't show up and just press a button and it's going to be the perfect image and the one that you keep. Now, throw on top of that the fact that you've got some really interesting things happening with the moon, which you definitely want to have a long lens for, and then really interesting things happening with the northern lights, which were happening all around the moon. Um, and you want to usually have your shorter lens for that or your wider lens. And so it was it was a little bit of mayhem, truly. I was thankful that I had I was training a guide at the time, that photography guide. So there was two of us at least with our group of 13 people, everybody with tripods, everyone trying to capture this moment. And we all know the lights are always moving and you don't always get them for a long period of time. So there's a sense of urgency with everybody and a lot of settings being changed. And I gotta tell you, like I really, really froze my fingers that night, changing everybody's camera gear. And
Oh no.
yeah,
Lasting effects or no?
it's fine. I mean,
Close.
I have some like lasting effects just from doing a lot of polar work, like in my toes and my fingers. I do get cold and a lot faster. And trust me, I've got like gloves on gloves on gloves systems, but yeah, I definitely had a few moments that night where I thought, okay, I gotta like slow it down a bit. And if we don't all get the perfect image, then so be it. But I did push it because it was a very cool, very unique opportunity for people for sure, especially with that lunar eclipse. So there's that. And then, can I share one more?
Of course.
So that's a physically uncomfortable. Mentally uncomfortable. I have a big goal of seeing all 8 bear species in the wild, and I was out looking for the spectacle bear in the cloud forest of Ecuador. And we were out there. It just so happened to be the time that the aguacatillo plants were starting to ripen. So they're like these tiny little avocados that look like the size of an olive. Really, they're kind of cool looking plants, really. And the spectacle bear is one of the most elusive and shy of all of the 8 bear species. They're really tough to find. And we were in a particular reserve where there was a lot of second growth forest and there was a lot of these aguacatillo plants. And it just so happened that we were there when they were ripening, which is really tough to time because things, the whole thing about being close to the equator and seasons and whatnot. And he, so because we were there at that time, we could walk through the forest and listen to breaking branches and locate where these bears were. And I was with a bunch of people from the International Conference of Bear Research and Management. So we're all super bear nerds. And this was like a big goal of ours to see one in the cloud forest. This was years and years ago. So I think that there's more regulations on how many guides that you have and, kind of the ethics of bear viewing there. So we were just looking for them in the cloud forest and we were able to, okay, yeah, breaking branches, go over there and, watching the bear behavior and trying to make sure that they weren't stressed out by us. And one time we were walking through and we look up and we had no idea that there was a spectacle bear eating right on top of where we were. So it was looking down at us. We were looking up at it. And they're really timid creatures, so that like there was not a lot of safety risk for us, but it was just you're disturbing a critter while it's trying to eat, and they make this really crazy kind of guttural sound, like almost like Chewbacca when they're feeling like they're threatened, and we all had cameras, and there were some people, trying to take photos and things like that. And anyways, I just felt really bad for that critter, and it was like such a big moment for me to be able to see one of those animals. And so, there's like, yeah, just some uncomfort guilt, but also, it was when we finally backed off and the critter was feeling comfortable again. We were at the pictures that we were taking, going up, looking into the cloud forest, black animal with white background and backlit.
That sounds cool.
Well, it was years and years ago, so the cameras weren't as good.
Oh, I see where you're going.
It's
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
to
It's just,
expose. So
is that moss or is that a bear or what is it?
it was. I wasn't happy with my pictures from that. There were some
Yeah.
people who came out with some really great stuff, but I remember thinking, like, after the fact, being so disappointed for like a few different reasons, but a lot of it too was that, my pictures weren't really that great, and it really changed my ethos as a photographer, because I was like, I'm never going to have that again. I'm never going to put that much pressure on a picture from a critter, and because it's always going to be situations that you can't control, and being too emotional about it, I think, makes people more unethical about their photography.
Mm,
And also, um, it's just not worth it to have to beat yourself up about that. You know what I mean?
hmm. Well, I
Um,
can certainly empathize about the first example, having been in very similar situations. And yeah, when you're photographing the Northern Lights or really anything nighttime and you're in those perfect settings and you're getting the shots, or at least you're getting closer to getting the shots. I mean, you're doing your trial shots and all, especially in cold environments, like, the excitement gets you to forego your senses sometimes. And I just remember photographing Northern Lights sometimes and thinking to myself, gosh, and my gloves are off because I have to get the shot in the moment. I have to press the right button. And I can't do it with my mittens and all that. And I'm just thinking, gosh, my fingers and hands have been numb for about a half an hour now. Is this bad? And yeah, it
yeah.
gets you to question if you're doing the right and the safe thing. Not to mention just the pain of going through that and then rewarming it and all that. So totally hear you there.
Sure.
So we talked about some of your camera gear, so I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of your kit. But this next question is about non-photo gear, but something that might be equally important. So what is a piece of gear for nature photography that is surprisingly helpful that is not directly camera related?
Hmm. But it's not directly camera related.
Like it's not a lens. It can be an accessory.
Can I throw it back on you? What would you say to this answer, to this question?
Yeah. Um, well, I'll tell you the most interesting answer I've gotten from someone was from Eddie Savage, and
Mhm.
he just without hesitation, he's like a towel, a microfiber towel. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I'm photographing in the Great Bear Rainforest and in China and in temperate forest there, and it's raining a lot, and you'd be surprised how helpful it is when it's raining or misting, but it's not enough to put your camera away. That just a nice microfiber towel is enough to get you to stay out there, keep your gear functional and safe and dry, and even double as a way to clean your lens, especially if there's water on your lens. Sometimes little microfiber cloths, like the lens cleaning cloths, are just not absorbent enough. So he thought without hesitation, don't forget to bring a towel. So I now bring a towel with me on all my trips, like a little,
Gosh.
like a square foot camp towel, just something small. It's like washcloth size. If I had to answer personally, I'd probably say some sort of lens pen or like I used to carry a toothbrush just to dust off my camera. I photograph in dusty, dry environments a lot. Um, so that might be my personal one. But yeah, if you don't have one, no worries. But it's along that vein.
They are both so typical of the places that you guys work, right? Like, thinking of Eddie and where he got his start with photography in the Great Bear Rainforest. It's no wonder it's something like that. Yeah, I mean, it would be rain protection. The first thought that I had would just be that waterproof bag. Like, I would never take my camera into
Yeah,
the field if I didn't have something that was super waterproof, just to throw my camera into. And
there you
I
go.
knew.
And that's a soft bag, right? It's not like a hard shell Pelican case or anything.
Yeah, it is a soft bag. You can throw your Pelican case into there if you
Okay.
want. But yeah, I make sure that there's padding around the camera, and I'm really careful with it. But then I know I have it in hand all the time, and that it's gonna be protected, because yeah, like I said, anything can happen. You just have your camera out and about, and I mean, we've all seen it, right? They can
Mm-hmm.
smash so quickly.
Oh,
Yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. Okay, so final question here. What is something that the Marlo of today would tell the Marlo just starting out on her nature travel and photographic journey?
Yeah, I think I would just I would say just to come into it with confidence, you know? I think that there's especially used to be, maybe there still is this kind of, you know, boundary for photographers that you can't be a professional photographer, a good photographer, or even call yourself a photographer unless you have crossed some imaginary line. And I can remember Annie Van Denther, who is, you know, a manager for the guides for Natural Habitat Adventures, one of the companies that I work for. Was sitting with her for my very first polar bear trip, and she said, "Who here is a photographer? Like, you take photos, Marlo." And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm not a photographer." And she gave me a really hard time about that. And if you know Annie, then you would believe that, you know, like she's really an advocate for people to one grow their skills, but you know, as women, be comfortable in this with the skills that we have and be able to share those with people. And so yeah, I wish that I had the more confidence early on to start sharing my work, because the more you share, the more you learn, the better you get, as has been my experience. And so it's just, I think I could have maybe grown even a little bit quicker. Yeah, if I had that, but I figured it out.
Well, excellent advice to end on, Marlo. Marlo, thank you so much for joining today. I'm always inspired when talking to you, with you about all sorts of things. This one was particularly engaging just because I'm a photo nerd. You, I don't want to give you labels, but I think you're a photo nerd. You said you're a bear nerd, so we'll say you are now a photographer nerd.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, I just really want to say thank you for joining today. Really had a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Court.